The weekend started like any other, with him away on one of his frequent business trips. I had gotten used to the quiet, the way the house settled into itself when it was just me. But this time I wasn't alone. My younger brother was visiting, a last-minute plan due to something falling through on his end. I didn't think much of it. We had always been close growing up, though things naturally changed as we got older. Still, I welcomed the company. First it was casual. We caught up over dinner, talked about family, work, meaningless things that filled the air with comfort. But as the evening wore on, I noticed little shifts, moments that held too long, silences that felt like they were waiting to be broken by more than just words. I didn't question it at first. He'd always been warm, polite, but something in the way he looked at me felt different. Or maybe it was me. I had been feeling alone for longer than I cared to admit. My marriage had grown cold in ways that didn't show on the outside. We still said the right things, did the routine, but the intimacy had faded into something performative. That's what made the warmth of my brother's presence so unnerving. It was unintentional, innocent, but there was comfort in it I hadn't felt in months. He listened, really listened, in a way I had stopped expecting from anyone. That evening, while pouring wine and talking about nothing, I caught myself watching him too closely, admiring the shape of his jaw, the way he smiled. It jolted me. Pushed it down. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. But I couldn't ignore how my body reacted to his closeness. The space between us on the couch felt charged, like every accidental brush of our hands was hiding something unsaid. I kept reminding myself he was family, that this was a line that shouldn't even be visible, let alone approached. And yet the line was there, faint but real. I went to bed restless, turning over memories of our talk, replaying the way he looked at me when I laughed a little too hard at his joke. There was nothing in his behavior that was out of line. It was me, my thoughts, my responses. That scared me more than anything. The next morning didn't help. We made breakfast together, moved around each other in the kitchen like we had some unspoken rhythm. I noticed the way his hand brushed my lower back when he passed me. Gentle, maybe even unintentional, but it lingered. I told myself again it was nothing. But I also knew that people in love, or lust, often pretend they didn't see what they saw, feel what they felt. As much as I wanted to deny it, something had shifted. I was no longer just alone with my brother. I was alone with a part of myself I didn't recognize, and it was awake. The hours passed more slowly that day. Every interaction wrapped in an unspoken awareness. We went about the house like nothing had changed, but something had. Every glance held a beat too long, every laugh carried a weight that didn't belong. He wasn't doing anything overt. He was just there, present, attentive, easy in his skin in a way that drew me in without trying. My mind kept drifting back to last night's conversations, the way he saw me. Not as someone's wife, not as someone who had settled into routine, but as someone with thoughts, opinions, a pulse. That simple recognition began to feel addictive. I caught myself watching him too much, catching details I'd never noticed or never let myself notice before. The way he carried himself, the subtle strength in his voice when he made a point, even the calm he brought into the room. I told myself it was emotional, that I was just craving connection. But deep down I knew it wasn't only that. There was a physical undercurrent that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us clearly felt. It made the silence heavier. He wasn't flirting, not directly. It was something in the way he asked questions, the way he remembered things I'd said years ago, the way his eyes met mine without hesitation. I wanted to pull away from it, but part of me didn't. Part of me wanted to stay in that feeling just a little longer. I remembered the last time my husband had really looked at me, not with obligation but with genuine interest. I couldn't. I remembered the last time we touched and it didn't feel routine. That was harder. I started to wonder how much of myself I had buried to keep peace, to maintain the image of a marriage that looked fine from the outside. The ache of that realization was louder than any guilt I was trying to convince myself with. I wasn't looking to escape into something reckless. I just wanted to feel something real, even for a moment. That afternoon we sat close. Not touching but closer than usual. The air between us thickened with each passing hour. He told me about a recent heartbreak, someone who never really saw him, who treated him like a second choice. His voice faltered, not for sympathy but because it mattered. I heard my own story in his. I told him things I hadn't said out loud in years, about the loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from lying beside someone who no longer reaches for you. He didn't interrupt, didn't fix, just listened. That kind of presence felt dangerous. We weren't pretending anymore. We both knew the energy had shifted. Still, we didn't touch. But in the quiet after he walked away to another room, I sat with my own thoughts and realized I had already crossed an invisible line. Not in body but in heart. I had allowed a door to open, one that could no longer be closed by logic or distance. The night fell slower than usual, and the silence between us had changed tone. There was no more room for pretending. Everything we hadn't said hovered in the pauses. We ate together without distraction, and every word exchanged carried weight, not because of what was said but because of what was deliberately left unsaid. His eyes didn't dart away like before. They stayed steady and unreadable, like he was waiting for me to make the next move or shut the door completely. I could feel my chest tighten with the anticipation I was trying to deny. There was no plan, no excuse ready to explain what was happening. We were just two people on a precipice, and neither of us wanted to take the first step. Yet neither of us wanted to walk away. It happened when the words stopped making sense, when the space between questions and answers blurred into something heavier. I looked at him and he looked back without blinking. There was no smile, no nervous laughter, just an understanding that stretched through the quiet. When he reached out, it wasn't bold or demanding. It was slow, hesitant, careful, like he was giving me every chance to say no. I didn't. My hand moved toward his without even thinking. It was instinct, not decision. When our fingers met, it was like something cracked open. We weren't just crossing a boundary. We were acknowledging that it had never been solid to begin with. The first touch was cautious, as if even our skin was unsure of what it was allowed to feel. But the caution didn't last long. Once the contact settled, the weight of restraint collapsed. I felt his breath close to mine, felt the way his hand rested against my side like it belonged there. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. I had convinced myself for so long that I was untouchable, that desire didn't exist outside obligation, that I had no right to want. And yet here I was, wanting with a clarity that silenced every reason I had rehearsed against it. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was delicate and intense, the kind of moment where every movement is measured not out of fear but out of reverence. Nothing was said, nothing needed to be. My heart pounded in ways it hadn't for years. My body responded not from lust alone, but from the simple, startling feeling of being wanted. Not out of duty, not out of routine, but because someone saw me and chose to stay in that moment. I felt his touch like an answer to every silent question I hadn't dared to ask. I knew it was temporary, I knew it was wrong by every standard that made sense. But it felt like the only thing that had made sense in a long time. When it ended, there was no regret in his eyes. Just understanding. No promises were made. There was no future being imagined. It was a moment suspended in time, built on silence, shared ache, and a connection neither of us asked for but both of us stepped into. And in that stillness, I understood that something irreversible had taken place.